Okay. My name is Denise Krebs, and I'm in Manama, Bahrain. And today is Sunday, August 9th, 2020. I'm interviewing Kim Johnson in Williamson, Georgia, for the oral history project titled COVID-19 Teacher Poets, Writing to Bridge the Distance, which will be archived by Oklahoma State University Oral History Research Program. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you
for joining us. And will you introduce yourself and tell us some of the events or experiences that led to you becoming a teacher?
Certainly. I'm Kim Johnson, and I live in Williamson, Georgia. We are a small, just a very rural town in about an hour south of Atlanta, the world's busiest airport. We're in very rural countryside. I am in a school district of about 3,000, Pike County Schools. And the events that led to my becoming a teacher, I've known my whole life that I wanted to be a teacher from a very early age. Started with wanting to write on the chalkboard and led from there. So I have about 22 years of experience in public schools and about 6 years in private school prior to that, and sometime as a substitute teacher in between those two stints of teaching. And currently I serve as the district literacy specialist for Pike County Schools.
Okay. And okay, Kim, going back to March 2020, how did you learn that teachers in your state would be quarantined? Can you remember the specific moments?
I can. It's almost like, learning when the towers had fallen or, other significant events, but that was a historical moment. We were in our media center. At the time, I was the literacy coach and media specialist at a middle school here. And we learned, we kind of started hearing through the grapevine through the day, oh, this school system has closed, that school system has closed. And so we sort of knew when we got the email that we would be having a faculty meeting after school in the media center. We had been set up for a speaker that day who was reading to us. And we sort of put the pieces together and figured out that we were probably going to be quarantined. And so that was the moment when we learned about this. And of course, we left everything in place. We went home and, if we had been in the middle of stapling papers, those were still on our desk when we returned. It just sort of it was a moment of pause in time. So that was...
You get a day's notice, you didn't come back the next day?
No. We could not enter our building for many weeks.
Wow. Okay, do you have a poem you want to share about?
I absolutely do. In fact, this is, as I was writing throughout April, I noticed, I've been part of Sarah Donovan's Ethical ELA. It's the 5-day writing challenge, the open write. And in April, I had 42 poems that were written. But very few of them, I think this is the only one really where the quarantine is mentioned. And I wrote this one on April the 19th, sort of in the middle of that month. And of course, we wrote every day during the month of April for National Poetry Month. But this one is called Almost Asleep. And this one was inspired by Allison Berryhill, who challenged us to write an onomatopoeic poem. So this is Almost Asleep. Pitch black dungeon dark, except for his screen beam of scrolling against the haint-proof blue headboard, eyelids fluttering lazily to the sounds of adrift on a dingy verge of the edge of a deep sleep forest, where the gnashing of the terrible teeth of the wild things on the fringes of the wild rumpus begins, with the whirring blur of a white noise fan, feverish scritch-scratch circling of schnauzer fits, beat sheep scratching to Shanghai rumble of thunder as we slumber under the refrain of pelting rain, grumbling growl of Schnoodle-Boo, the king of all wild things, who's schnoozing too. And so that was reference from Maurice Sendak, from Where the Wild Things Are. So I didn't really realize it at the time. I think it was sort of one of those subliminal things where you realize later that maybe this was part of your feelings about COVID and the quarantine and the darkness of this time sort of creeping into the poetry.
That was beautiful. That drifting off to sleep in the dinghy, the edge of the deep forest, like that's just such a beautiful image of those moments before we fall asleep. And
Thank
nice. You. So this project emerged from that month that you were talking about, and I wonder if how reading and writing poetry fit into your life during quarantine, or how did it change from previous months?
That's a great question. I was looking back. I have a blog, and so everything that I write, I post on my blog as well, not only on whatever writing invitation I might be writing for, but it all goes on my blog. And I noticed some patterns of, like for March, I had 5 entries. April, I had 42. May was 6. June was 7. July was 20. And so I haven't calculated April yet, but I saw the kind of those 5-day open writes. I saw the minimal writing, but then during the time of COVID, definitely I should have had 30. I had 42. Some of that was because I was doing some posting at the time for students who were home being quarantined, and so I gave them some ideas each day, like using metaphor dice or story cubes or high cubes. Some of these ideas I put on my Facebook page just as an example of, how to, go about the time doing some writing at home. During that time, I was also hosting 2 days during April, and I had been reading The Last Avant-Garde by David Lehman about the New York Poets Society. And so in this book, we meet Frank O'Hara. And so a couple of his poems actually inspired my inspirations as well for the month. And that was, I think I hosted on maybe the 16th and 17th. And we did Having a Coke with You poems and Fortune Cookie poems, which were whimsical, eclectic, just kind of not weird, but random. And so I wanted to break up, sort of the serious feeling with an opportunity to write something that's a little out there. So that was all part of what I did and how my writing changed. I was definitely doing some reading, but definitely more writing. And the writing was inspired by the reading. Another thing I did during the time of COVID was I started an art journal, like with some writing, and this was just designed to be writing in response to some of the poetry, some of the art that we had done. And so I made mine about place. I'm definitely no artist, and some of these are stickers, but I did write a lot about the farm where I live. These are some pressed flowers from a wall. Did mixed media with collage. Just kind of like the scientific names for some fennel and black swallowtail butterflies, which I have a butterfly garden, and bee houses. So these were things that were inspired during that time of COVID. And so that's sort of how my writing changed. One thing I noticed was the overwhelming or overarching theme of place. Everything I wrote seemed to be about place. So I do have another poem called Detail of Sapelo River. And I noticed that I was thinking about places in my life from the past, places of comfort. My family had a second home on the Sapelo River. And so I wrote this one on April the 20th. It was inspired by Anne and Abigail to give a rich description of place. So from my childhood, this is a poem about the Sapelo River. Your marsh and river at dawn and dusk are a changing paint palette of unpredictable brilliance. A back I scratched on novice water skis, an arm I tickled casting lines, nets, shells. You picked up the dinner check, deviled crab, steamed shrimp, fried fish, and lulled me peacefully in a dock hammock as I listened for those playful dinnertime dolphins. An empty mollusk shell now, a market price far less than what you've given. So that place recently sold during our time of quarantine, but it was a place where I took a lot of comfort in the memories that I had there with my family.
Wow. Tell us more about that, about those meals that you got from the Sapelo River.
Oh, wow. Those were wonderful days. As a child, we threw a cast net. We fished right off the dock. We went out in the boat, did a lot of fishing. I loved to put crab baskets out with my grandmother and my grandfather. So these were, we often made low country boil. At the time we lived in South Carolina, but we would come and this place was about an hour from where we lived. So we sort of crossed the state line a lot, but Hilton Head was another place where we ate a lot of seafood, and we lived there. And I grew up on St. Simon. So islands, seafood has been a big part of my life, but those meals were pretty precious. And you can take any of those restaurants that you love to go to in Florida during the summertime, and my grandmother had those all beat hands down. It was the kind of the home cooking. She just perfected fried fish and oysters, how to steam oysters. So those were great memories. Kind of makes me hungry now.
Yes, you're making me hungry. Yeah, and I had told you earlier, I looked that up. I had to look up the Sapelo River on the Atlantic there, the head of the Sapelo, or the mouth of the Sapelo River. Is that it? Like where the dolphins would be? Like, just sounds amazing.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that poem.
In the evenings, they would come. In the evenings, we would wait for them. They were very predictable because the tide pattern would bring them in, and that was one of our favorite times down there, was just listening and being able to see them and interact with them a little bit in the water.
Okay, so I don't know if we talked. Let's talk more. So we talked about your writing during this COVID time, but let's hear a little bit more about how you guys handled the school closure, and how did you have to work online, and how did that all go?
Because we are a rural district, about 50% of our students have access to internet. Of that 50%, many of them don't own devices, or if they do, they might have multiple family members sharing that device. So a lot of what we provided in the way of instruction was paper and pencil. We had choice boards. I did go in to a specific office. We had a place where we could go to continue to work. I did, as part of the leadership team in Pike County, I did go in to sort of help design some of those choice boards and some of those options for students, knowing what our challenges were. But our instruction really was very limited by the fact that we don't have internet in our rural county. And that's not a problem that's exclusive to Pike County. That's a problem that is known throughout Georgia. There's a line you can draw just south of Atlanta, the city, and if you had a color-coded map, you would see how very, very limited most of Georgia is south of Atlanta. And so that was us. We're right there on the cusp of what works and what doesn't. In fact, one county up, actually 2 counties over, is Henry County, and they lead the state in technology instruction for students. We're 2 counties below that, and we can't touch nearly what they're able to do. So it was a lot of work and planning and distributing of work. We would leave it outside the school door for families to drive by and pick up. And we also continue to offer meal service for those students who needed that. So they would come on Wednesdays and Mondays, and I think it was Monday, one of the days, and get food for several days that would last them through the week.
Right. Wow. So, if you have anything else to say about that time of
I think
go ahead.
Tide is turning. I mean, if anything else to say, like the direction, what I see is as in the future of education, I see that we're going to be dealing with COVID for some time. We are currently planning, our teachers came back officially this past Tuesday, which was August the 4th, and our students return 2 days from now on August the 11th, which will be a Tuesday. But as we think about the future of education and how this has impacted what we do, the way we've always done things so traditionally, I did note that there were times and moments in my own writing where I think I was grasping for that hope as I wrote. And so another poem that I wrote during this time was called Paint Chips. And this one was one when I inspired my own students on my Facebook page. This is a little game called Paint Chip Poetry. And it has, if I can just pull one out, I just want to show this because it's so incredible. It has different colors that have words on them. So like, for example, seedling. This one is called The Road Less Traveled. It's a brown shade. This one is called Smooth Sailing. This one is called Mountain Town. And so all of these different shades kind of capture different feelings or moods or places. And one of the poems that I wrote was called, I didn't title it anything other than Paint Chips, but it says, well, the paint chips that I drew were smooth sailing, blank canvas, summer squash, seedling, dirt road, fresh squeezed, chamomile tea, firefly, and waterfall. So I put those paint chips down, and this is what came from that. Smooth sailing days of spring, walking the blank canvas of the dirt road less traveled, smelling summer squash seedlings and fresh squeezed tulips, ambling home for a front porch swing cup of chamomile tea steeped in fireflies and waterfalls. And I think, some of the writing that we did, whether we realized it or not, when we sort of sit back and let the pen lead, it brings out our feelings. That's why I think writing is such a powerful form of therapy. It was really my therapy. The group that I was writing with, being able to share, have that sense of connectedness, because during a time of quarantine, that was vitally important to have contact outside of my walls of my home. But the poems kind of give the idea there's a sense of hope. While we were grounded in our homes and kept safe away from people so that we could prevent the spread of the virus, I think one of the silver linings there for me was that I was really able to get in touch with this place and just being able to be outdoors on the farm, being able to take walks, being able to see sunrise, being able to get out, just enjoy coffee on the swing, things that I don't normally do. So while it had its challenges and its drawbacks, it also had its pluses. And that was one of them, was being able to really appreciate moments.
Yeah. And I can echo that too. And also I have a question about how you touched on it once, but I wanted to hear more about it specifically, that do you remember how the other teacher poets responded to any of your work, or how those discussions we would have, how that, you could tell us more about that, how that helped? It was a community that we had there that.
Oh, it was just fabulous, because, one of the things I love about our writing group is that we come from many different walks. We have a sense of trust in that group, where if we've got scars from the past, and all of us do, if we have things going on immediately in our lives, which, a few of us were going through rough times during COVID. And I think that one of the things that I appreciate so much about the group is the affirmation, the reassurance that, things might be crumbling all around us, but there's a strength of spirit to persevere. And those things that we're going through become sources of strength for other people. They mark us in ways that don't have to be bitter. You can be bitter, not better, when you're going through something like a divorce, which at least one of our members was going through that at this time. And having been through that in a non-COVID time myself, I can only imagine that her pain and her experience was far more concentrated in sadness and despair than mine was at the time. Because, when you can get out and be lifted by your friends and be around people, that does make the dark time a little brighter. But I believe that, just responding to the poems, being able to be that source of inspiration, looking at letting writing inspire what has been happy, because sometimes on our own, we don't think back on the happy moments of our lives. But when someone inspires us to do that, and we're looking at different ways we can show that in writing, we stumble across more happiness than we would have encountered otherwise. So I really praise the group for just the affirmation and the sense of community during that dark time. And the feedback was lovely.
And like you said, that I appreciated too when you did do the one about having a Coke with a friend, or mine was having a pot of cracked tea. And yeah. So it was nice to bring in that little whimsy, and like you said, remind us of our happy times too, when it's a little down times. But so yeah, it was a lovely group. And and you had some connections. Can you tell us about your connections that you had as you were writing poetry with this group in that other space? You were also inspiring kids in your school district to write poems too. Can you tell us more about that? Maybe you did with the...
Well, basically what I did was each day, I thought back to the previous April. I think I've got journal upon journal of things that we had done in previous times. I mean, some of these are spine poetry, and let's see what else I've got in here. All kinds of poems that we've written in the April before. So I pulled these older journals out, and what I did was I looked back and created 30 days of poetry inspirations for students, things that would be appropriate for students to write about. And I created 1 minute to 3 minute YouTube uploads with sort of the model that we use, where we have an inspiration or a challenge to write something, and then a model poem, and then the invitation for students to go write. And so that became something that was very powerful for me as well, looking back on a year ago when we wrote with Sarah in April. So sort of looking back at what was going on during that time, and then putting it in the context of now, and then inviting others to write as well. So that was a wonderful time for me to see that students were still writing.
Wonder if you have any stories, or if you've had a chance to connect with any of your students about what it meant to them at all.
I haven't had too much of a chance to connect, but I did have a student who did participate in what is called, it was the NCTE Promising Young Writers program. And she wrote a lot about place as well. She actually had a part of her speech. She wrote a speech for her aunt who is into environmental. She promotes environmental awareness, and so Sarah was one of my students, and she wrote part of a speech about that, about the effects of global warming, and that was actually read to the United Nations. Part of her speech was read at the United Nations back in April, and I think it was April, it might have been the end of March, but that was an exciting time, and I recently saw her just this past week. She came and read another speech at a meeting where I was, and so I know that she has been engaged in writing throughout this time as well. Her family has a place in the mountains of North Georgia, in LJ, and they go there quite often, and she writes about those beautiful mountains and things that she experiences there. That's the apple capital of Georgia.
So you had mentioned about the hope after COVID-19, but I wonder if you want to tell us about your state and local schools and what's going on with school starting. I know you've already gone back to work and kids are coming soon, I think.
Yes. Currently what we're doing what many, schools throughout the nation are doing. We basically have three models. Students can opt out of face-to-face learning, and those students will be, they'll be engaged in courses on Edgenuity. So when they sign on for that, they're signing on for the whole semester. In other words, they can't start Edgenuity and then come back to face because of the way the grading goes, especially our high schoolers, because that will be part of their course grade. But our middle schoolers also can opt into that. And so we have an opt-out where they do Edgenuity. They can also just come back face-to-face. But we also have to be, in that manner, we have to be prepared for students who come back and either get sick, and we might have half the class there on one day, and the next day half the class, but it might not ever be the same half of the class. So we're actually using Zoom and Blackboard Ultra for synchronous and asynchronous learning. And we also have to be prepared for a forced closure. And so in the event of a forced closure, everyone will go into their model of Blackboard and Zoom. So what teachers are going to do as we come face-to-face on Tuesday, they will train students how to access new emails that are there for Blackboard. They'll train them how to go on and access their lessons. And the other thing that they'll do is try to keep that instruction in sync so that they're actually doing more of a blended model, even in a face-to-face setting, so that everything that they do in class will be online, so that if they're absent or whatever, we get forced into that, there's a seamless transition to instruction from school to home.
Wow, it's all untested right now, I guess, right? I mean, you're just figuring it out as you go.
It is, and then there's that other part, that 50% that doesn't have internet access, where we'll have to provide paper, pencil instruction for them. We'll have to do choice boards, we'll have to have lessons on paper, and they'll have to come and get that. I mean, the show goes on. We'll find a way to make it happen, and it'll be good. I do have some concerns about not just our students getting sick, but many of our teachers in Pike County are older. We don't have just a bunch of young teachers who are coming to the rural countryside to teach because there's not a great social life here. Most of us are settled down on long-standing family farms, and many of us are not transplants. Now, I came here because my husband lives here, and I met him and resettled here. But this would not have been a place if I had been in my 20s or 30s looking to start out. It wouldn't have been my choice to come here. So as a result, many of our teachers are older. We're probably 40 and 50 years old, and many of our substitutes are retired. So when we look at who's going to be in those classrooms and the population that COVID tends to affect most greatly, I do have some concerns about that for our teaching force. Our human resources could take a hit.
Wow. So, have you had a chance to think about what you've learned about education overall, or what you hope the public is learning about education as a result of this unexpected interruption?
It doesn't take four walls to become educated. I think really and truly one thing that has happened with our students is we've learned as a community that there's organized instruction, and we call that education. But there's so much more to education than what happens in our walls. One thing that I know for sure that in our community, students who live on farms and work with animals, we have the largest FFA program in the state in our rural community. And I know that many of our students have developed an appreciation for outdoors more than they have when they've been in the walls of the school. So I know that many of them have worked on their farms. They've learned new things. And so what I've learned about education is there's never not going to be a challenge. There will always be a challenge. There will always be ways of learning. Just because we have a school, we have bricks and mortar, those don't determine what we learn. They might determine how we learn, but they don't determine what we learn. And so I feel like the learning has definitely continued, and maybe in a lot of ways it's been a good thing, because I think people have developed hobbies, to keep from getting bored. Those without internet access and things like this, maybe they've gotten out, maybe they've done puzzles with family, maybe they've read a little bit. So I tend to think on the bright side, and I certainly hope that's the case. But I don't think it's all been quite as bad as everybody thinks that maybe it has been. Everybody's talking about the COVID slide and how students have regressed. And I believe that's probably true of our younger readers. I think our kindergarten and first grade readers, they've needed more direct instruction in that. But once, for our students who are readers and they've passed they're not learning to read, they're reading to learn. I think that this has been a wonderful time for them to have some concentrated time with family. And, I don't think that learning has stopped, and I don't think it will.
Nice. And what about the equity and access that we talked about? How do you think that this will do you think there will be any benefits that come, any hopeful situation in that in the future, that maybe they'll see that those counties just so geographically close that maybe there could be more equity?
That has already happened, as a matter of fact. We have one of the things that our county commissioners had been working on was working with the senators and the House and the representatives to bring awareness of the need for internet. And we had sort of hit a brick wall, because until it becomes absolutely necessary, it's never the priority. But when we had to hit the brakes as schools and provide online learning for students, and we couldn't do that. Not that we weren't willing. Every teacher was doing that. They were willing. They were anxious to continue the instruction. But the problem was that the accessibility of internet was not there. That's where people that were at the top saw the need for this. So I see a lot of things happening in that respect. And I think this has opened the eyes of people who have the power to make those changes. So I'm again, there are silver linings in this challenge, because had we not had this happen, then I think we would have been fighting for better internet for a long, long, long time. But now that this has happened, the powers that be have got to take some action on it. So it's forced some reactions to it.
Okay. And how about for teachers? What are some of the important things that they need to be doing now as they prepare for the fall?
Oh my goodness, there's so many things. The list it's so long and it gets longer and longer. But I think where we are, all of these, I keep saying that I feel like the whole COVID thing is like this logical fallacy. Nothing makes sense. Somebody said it's like you got in this game of Jumanji and where are we in 2020? But I think that really, like, for one thing I've been doing lately is helping a chorus teacher. She's not sure how she's going to continue her instruction because in the face-to-face setting, they're not allowed to sing. They can't sing. And so where we're having these conversations about whether you're distance learning or whether you're in a classroom and you can't sing in chorus, what do you do? So I think where teachers need to be right now is always having that plan B. We've got to give a lot of forethought to if this, then that. We've got to be steps ahead of the COVID game in terms of where it might take us and what our response to that is to be able to continue instruction with students. So we've been brainstorming, and it's been a great thing because I love our chorus teacher, but we don't always get a whole lot of time to sit and chat together. So we've done that recently, and we've come up and brainstormed many different ways of continuing chorus. And one of them is looking at verse novels. All of our music starts as verse and lyrics. We've talked about creating a timeline and how music and lyrics preserve a sense of exactly what this oral history project is doing. We're time stamping our experience, and so the things that come out of music are lessons for us. How people were feeling, how they dealt with things, what were the events of the day. I think of Billy Joel. We didn't start the fire. That one was powerful. And as we look at different ways of doing things that we're trying to do to teach students, we have to look at doing them not the same way we've always done them, but looking beyond. We're looking at bringing in parts of Kwame Alexander, like excerpts of Solo when he talks about landslide, and how maybe Fleetwood Mac's song shows how his life was sort of like a landslide. So there's so many opportunities for chorus and for just developing a greater sense of music appreciation, using some of those technologies like Flipgrid or YouTube to sing part of a song and maybe do something like Eric Whitaker did, the virtual choir, where everybody's on a YouTube and it blends. I think the future, what teachers need to be doing is thinking about Plan B and Plan C and Plan D, because we're not going to stop teaching kids. They're not going to stop learning. But we just have to constantly be ready to change our footwork, get in a new position, and be ready.
I like that, change our footwork. Very nice. Good. Well, I need to one thing I didn't, you've alluded to it because you're interviewing this or working with the chorus teacher, but did you tell us tell us more about your position that you're in, because you are in leadership and you're helping to make this thing happen this fall. You could kind of tell us what you're, yeah.
It's a great place to be. My position has evolved during COVID. It's changed some. And so I've taught all grade levels. I started out in early childhood education, and I looped up to elementary, and I looped up to middle, and then I looped up to high school. So I kept following some of my students, and that's been a really awesome experience in terms of just seeing the gamut. I got to see the whole experience, and people ask me, do you have a favorite grade level? No, I don't. there have been challenges and there have been bright spots at every single grade level. My concentration in content, of course, was ELA. I loved writing and reading, probably more writing than reading, because let's face it, I like to talk more than I like to listen sometimes. So that sort of translates in terms of what we do as far as writing and reading. But my place I also went into the media center about 3 years ago. I accepted a position as the literacy coach and the media specialist. It was a combined position. They said 60-40. I said, no, it'll be 100-100. And we both know this, but I'm willing to do it. And so I went into that position, and really just a lot of everything, all of my whole experience of teaching kind of came full circle there, where I saw parts and pieces moving, and they were able to, we brought in guest speakers. We looked at school improvement plans and how to make those things work. Looked at English language learning, and just, so much of it came together in that position. And so throughout the summer, I didn't really stop working. I worked. I didn't get that clean break that, teachers talk about. Well, we haven't done anything since March 13th. But that job never stopped for those of us who were trying to get the choice boards and communicate with families and organize learning so it could carry on. We took ideas from teachers, we asked them to submit ideas, and we put those together on those choice boards. So it was sort of a quilted effort in terms of, who was contributing. Everyone was contributing. And then there were those of us who were trying to organize the whole thing and make the quilt out of all the little fragments of ideas. And so that was powerful. It was collaborative. We were able to talk a lot during that process. So our teachers were really the driving force of that best practice and where kids were and what activities would help them. It was at that time we received a grant. We received the L4GA grant in Georgia. So our school received roughly $1 million over the next 5 years. So each year we'll get just short of $1 million. And so they asked me to come into that position and be partly grant administrator and partly district literacy specialist, where I am looking at literacy from each end of the curriculum, all parts of the curriculum, every age group, and being able to meet with teachers and look at our literacy plan. What are the gaps? What needs to improve? So I do that wholeheartedly, because I say that's the water I swim in. That's, leave math to the math teachers, but let me have the reading and writing and go somewhere with that, because that's where my passion is. That's where my heart is. And so I accepted that position without hesitation. And it's really, right now we're looking at, all of the testing that we have to do to get it off the ground. There is some concern about, will we be there to do this testing that we need to do? But I have every confidence that one way or another, we will get that done. And we've at least got a starting point now to give our kids more opportunities so that they can extend their learning in ways that we have not been able to do that before, because money matters.
Nice. Thanks, Kim. And I guess to get that grant money, and if testing, pre-testing is part of it, you will figure out a way to test them. But is there a way to do that online, or you'll figure it out if there isn't anything yet? We
can do parts of that online. We could do all of it, but we experimented a little bit with one of the tests that we have to give. And we are concerned about administering that one online because of just the hearing part. We need to be able to see each other's mouths, and we can do that to a point. We can hear, but when it comes to really getting accurate data and implementing that with fidelity, we either want to do them all online or all face-to-face. So that one we will probably see about scheduling students maybe to come in face-to-face and just do some distancing so that we can get accurate readings on that.
Sure, that'll work. Good. And you had mentioned that you like to speak more than listen. And I I would have guessed that you were an introvert, and are you an introvert?
I am an introvert.
Okay.
But as far as writing, sometimes I think I like to speak more than listen. In the ELA realm, I think that's true. I like writing more than reading. In real life, probably face-to-face, I would say I do a little bit more listening than talking. But I do a fair amount of both. So.
And then that leads me to another question about like the emotional health of our maybe our extrovert students or the students who have been home. But like you said, lots of good family time. So there are silver linings. But I wonder if your district or you've been doing any work with that, the emotional health of our kids who have been home for these months.
Well, not so much as far as, that social emotional learning component that we have in our system. That's been a part that I think most of us have been greatly concerned about. I attended a meeting just this week about the number. If you looked at the data on DFACS, you would see that the cases of reports are way down. But the leader who was sharing that data said this is where qualitative data and really thinking about and analyzing that data is so important, because right now kids aren't going out. They're not going to school where teachers see the evidence of what might really be happening in homes. While we've been providing food for students throughout the summer, that's another piece that we've tried to meet, but we don't know if we provide food for one student or two students or three students, how many cousins might be living there, how many family members are relying on that food. We don't know this. So the social emotional learning and just mental health provisions have been of great concern during this time. There's not a teacher out there in our system that doesn't have concerns about at least one of their students. And so I think that has not been a silver lining in all this, because so many students in darker places than where our experience seems to be, don't have that voice. They don't have that person. Their teacher's not there for them to connect with every day. Their friends are not there. So I think for students who have been in rough spots, this has definitely been more challenging than any of us realize right now. I think the stories that will come out of this later on down the line will rival some of the people that I can think of that have written books, on this. Think of the guy that wrote. I can't remember his name, but I think a lot of stories will come out about, and probably both ways. That it was a great place, a time of where I felt safe at home, and then on the other side, I think we'll also get a lot of stories where students didn't.
Okay. Well, we have. How about? Do you have any other questions there? Because we haven't even been talking an hour yet. I'm wondering what other questions we need to ask.
I can't think of other questions to ask as far as COVID goes and in the time of writing, but I do know that the best stories and the richest experiences are what provide the groundwork for the best writing. So I feel like, while we've got so many things to say about our time during COVID and how that has impacted our lives, there are many, many rich stories that will come out of this. I really feel sorry for people who have had big events. I feel terrible for people who have welcomed new grandchildren into the world and could not be there to hold those babies. I feel a tremendous sense of sadness, overwhelming sadness for people who have lost loved ones during this time. They've been in the hospital, and those family members have not been able to go in. In fact, my own mother-in-law was diagnosed as stage 4 brain cancer. She has a glioblastoma, and that diagnosis came in December. And there were several times when, after a seizure, we may otherwise have called 911 and sent her to the hospital, but because of COVID, knowing that she would not survive that time, knowing that no one could be with her in the hospital so that she had that advocate there with her, those decisions were far different than they would have been in a normal time. And so I feel, just this sense of real sadness for brides who had planned to walk the aisle in April and May, and people who had funerals, and we couldn't go because we had to socially distance. So those are things that I think in the future we're going to be hearing more about those stories and what happened, and the profound sense of sadness and loss during this time. But I'm also looking forward to the stories of happiness and joy that came out of it as well. Where people may have put their life in perspective and gotten some affairs in order to realize that, maybe I need to make peace with that family member. So I think they're both sides of this coin, but I think we're not far enough beyond COVID to know those stories yet. I think they will come out, and I think I'm looking forward to the happy ones, but the sad ones are real. And I think in a weird sense, I'm feeling the need to mourn some of those. Even in church, even church, we haven't been able to go to church. So while schools have been closed and churches have been closed, there haven't been, if you weren't part of this writing community, or, you were separated, more solitary than most, then I think it was more of a challenge.
Yeah, it would have been a lonely time. I did think of a couple more questions about, you had mentioned that you noticed your poems were being, you were writing poems about place.
Can you start that over? Can you start that over? You froze up just a little bit, so I didn't hear the first part.
Good. Okay. Thank you. You had mentioned that you were writing, you had noticed kind of that your poems were a lot about place. And so I wondered if you could tell us more about that process. Did you, when you noticed it, then you kind of kept that theme going? Or did you consciously think it, or it just was coming out of this sense of place in your place?
Okay, so I didn't hear all the question, but I'm going to anticipate. You're asking me about how I noticed the theme of place that was emerging. And I think that probably just a lot of what we write about is where we are and being in a place, but thinking about places throughout our lives just sort of, it tended to take on a predominance in my life. It also probably had to do with the time of year. The time this happened, there was no greater time for COVID to happen, in my opinion. If we had to look at when, the impact of when this happened, it was great because it was springtime. And we had done most of, let's face it, the fourth quarter of school is mostly about review before testing. So the bulk of our instruction had been done. We can thank our good Lord for that, because there were a lot of things that students would have otherwise missed out on. Had this happened at Christmas time, had it happened sooner, then we would have missed celebrations with families. Even though we don't always think so favorably about how Christmas is a money machine, it did help our economy at the end of the year. So that's important for retailers and businesses to have Christmas time. So I'm thankful that it didn't impact us then. It may could have been better had it started at the beginning of summer, but let's, as I look at it, I'm thankful because we were able to get outdoors. And I think that has had a lot to do with generating the way that I wrote about place. It's because we were outside, we were working with chickens and goats and pigs and looking at plants and herb gardens and butterfly gardens. And those were times that could be enjoyed. At no other time of the year can you really get out other than fall and really enjoy being there. And I think it just took on a priority to be able to spend some time alone in nature, and that was reflected in the writing.
Yeah, it sounds like a magical place on the farm during the spring.
I think it is. It is a magical place, and it takes a lot of work. It's a lot of farm chores and feeding animals and making sure everybody's okay. But it is a magical place, and I don't take that for granted, because I think and I'm sure that no matter where I was during the time of COVID, there would have been something great about that place. I was a member of the Facebook group that posted pictures from all over the world, my view of COVID. And there were just gorgeous pictures coming out of Italy and France and the Netherlands, and all around the world, people would just take a picture of outside their window. And so you saw glorious tulips and just all of these wonderful, peaceful places. And so no matter where we were, I think there was probably something magical about that. And even in the inner city, I think it would have been nice to have opened a window and seen somebody playing from their balcony, playing a guitar or a violin or singing or something. So, no matter where we were, I think there were great things to see and experience in the way that people were trying to come together and make that time. We're all in this together.
You're inspiring me to write about place more. And I wonder, what's resonating with you now about that and your place in the summer, your future for writing, or are you, yeah.
Well, what's resonating is just how it became almost a feverish attempt to get out of the walls a little bit. And I know, during the time of COVID, they were recommending that people spend their dollars on vacations in the state. Like everybody in Georgia tends to head to Florida for the week of family vacation. And our state leaders said, if you can spend your dollars in the state, that would be awesome, because it will keep our money, it will help our economy. So one of the things we did was we decided we would just take, instead of taking a week somewhere this year, we would take 3 weekends and go, different places in the state. And one of those places we chose was Blue Ridge, Georgia. While I was there, this just kind of gives an idea of the great man that I'm married to. He knows my writing passion. And so while I'm there, I get on and I say, well, what's going on in Blue Ridge this weekend? And so one of the things that was going on in Blue Ridge that weekend was the Smithsonian was there for Crossroads Change in Rural Georgia. And as part of this exhibit, what they had some literary events. And one of those was, it was an evening of Appalachian stories, which was sold out. It was sold out. But I went to what was called the communal pen workshop that morning. They had a professor from University of North Georgia who was leading a writing workshop, and it was from 10 till 1:30. So I found out about this on Friday night, and it's the next morning. So I quickly tried to register thinking, oh, please don't let it be full. So I just showed up, and they said, oh, come on in, we have a seat. And I said, well, I'm so excited. I really wanted to hear the stories too. And they said, well, ma'am, if you can just let me check, we'll go out and see if there's been any cancellation. So they went out, and sure enough, they had 2 seats that had been canceled. So we picked those up. So I was able to participate in that writing workshop. And it was the neatest concept because, as fate would have it, the instructor there, her name was Gloria Bennett, and she led us through a series of prompts, and her specialty was writing on place. So she had front and back pages of prompts that related to, everything from your, how is your kitchen like your grandmother's kitchen? What about your memories as a child outside? Did you watch fireflies? She shared some of her writing, and then we had a series of prompts to pick from. And that was just a really great time of sharing and being able to write, and share that. And I love the concept of the communal pen. So what I did, I had been looking for some different ideas. Our grant focuses on birth to 12th grade. This magazine I stumbled across, it's called Taproot. And I love the idea because what they do, every issue has a theme. This one is grow. And so throughout these years of Taproot, the way they approach this, I noticed in the table of contents, is they have stories on hands, head, hands, and heart. And I like that concept for creating a communal pen in Pike County using the same concept as Taproot, where maybe people who don't think of themselves as writers can be storytellers. They're great storytellers who can come and share those stories with some of our high schoolers who can then take their stories and preserve those in the form of online stories that are shared. So getting back to the original question, how does place resonate? I think it really inspired me to go and look at what's going on around me. I love the mountains of North Georgia. That's one of my favorite places. And it's so sad because I grew up on the beach. I grew up on St. Simons and Hilton Head. So, when everybody else wants to go on vacation, I'm like, no, that's home. The beach is home. I want to go on vacation. So I want to go to the mountains. And that feeling of place, what I notice is that when I visit a new place, my awareness is heightened. I'm looking at everything. Here, I walk out and, I know those trees are there. I've seen them. But when I'm in a new place, I'm looking at every single detail. I'm looking at the trees. I'm looking at, you have trains here. You have, this is your layout of your city. Oh, the architecture is spectacular. This food is great. So I think that my feeling about place resonates with me because I recognize that I need to get out of my zone once in a while and just have my senses heightened and be aware, because it brings me home, and I notice, then I start thinking of what I have here that's so wonderful. So it brings me an appreciation of here.
That was beautiful. Thank you. So, I haven't been to your blog lately, but what's the latest writing you've been doing?
Let's see, the latest writing I've been doing is, I've been writing some in the mornings. I've been getting up and just, one of the things I've done is I've written some stories about my children and their experiences growing up. But my blog is, it's called Dr. Johnson's Common Threads .blogspot.com. And I have been writing about some of the memories that my children have over the years. And so you're welcome to go and read some of those. But some of, one of the stories of my children there, I call them the octane trio, because the years on the gas pump, the 87, 89, 93, are the years that they were born. And so I never recognized that until one day we pulled up to get gas, and one of my children in the backseat said, "Hey, Mom, look, we're like the octane trio. Those are the years we were born." And so it's just kind of cool like that. But they're always, I have 3 children who we have, during the time of COVID, we've had a group text going on where we've shared moments of joy. So if somebody was doing something that brought them joy, we had a little group text going on. We'd say, hey, this is my moment of joy, and we'd share a picture. But they've also started kind of ribbing each other as they do. They're so fun at getting in fake fights where they're trying to, make fun of each other and whatnot, and go back to those stories, like the time we were heading to New York City and they were supposed to pack lightly, and one of them had a kazoo in the bottom of their backpack, and so we never let them live that down. We'll always from time to time ask, like, "I've got your kazoo. Are you ready for the day?" And then another time when I didn't mean to, but I abandoned my youngest child at Barnes & Noble. And she was tired, and she was in the store with me. And we were parked on the curb. But when I got to the checkout, she said, "Mom, I'm so tired. Can I just go to the car?" And I said, "Yes, just stay on the sidewalk," meaning don't go in the street to get in the car. We're parked on the curb. So she did, or I thought she did. And when I got to the grocery store off island, I realized that my 4-year-old was not in the car on the back seat asleep. She had done what I told her to do. She stayed on the sidewalk. So she stayed at Barnes & Noble, but fortunately her teacher, one of her pre-K teachers, was there. So when someone saw her and said, "Hey, what's this little girl doing on the sidewalk?" She went to the children's department and sat with her pre-K teacher. But I thought about the horrors of that time, and they still say, "Oh, you get the Bad Mom of the Year award. You abandoned your child." But it was it could have been horrific, but it had someone was looking out for us in that experience. But all of those times when you're growing up and you have those stories, that's really kind of what I've been looking at lately is memories of my children growing up.
Now we've been talking a little over an hour now, but I mean, we have more longer if you have anything else that I haven't asked, because like I said, I'm exhausting my questions, but I don't want, like, if you have anything else you can share that would be helpful for this project. And we want to get it on. Anything about writing, teaching, COVID-19, and the connections between the three.
Oh, goodness. Not that I haven't already shared. I think that really it's been a great process. Writing has been the saving grace. It is a therapy. It is it's just a way of kind of, I guess my biggest insight might have been what I call letting the pen lead. A lot of times I'll think about a topic and I might have an idea, and I might try to go down a road with it. Maybe this goes back to I need to do more listening than talking, let the pen hear what it is that my brain needs to say. But, just kind of, I would start out with an idea, but I would notice that as I started tumbling that in what I call my rock tumbler, turning the ideas around, it would not be what I started out with. I would sort of go through the process took me. The pen would go in different places that I thought it was going to go, and my plan for what I thought I was going to write turns out completely differently. So that's been a great experience throughout this, is just kind of letting words flow, just kind of being quiet. It's kind of like that prayer time where you're just quiet and you listen and you preserve what you hear. So in a strange sense, it's almost like that's what writing has done. It's given me a time to be reflective and think about life and where we are, where we're headed. So I would say, let the pen lead more often, because I've learned some things from that. I do have one more poem, if you want me to share it.
And I do. I want to clarify that quote you said, though. Let the pen lead. You said, huh?
Yeah.
I have to remember that.
Let the pen lead. Sometimes our own words get in the way of better words. So I think letting the pen lead has been something that I've learned throughout this is my plan for what, when I do my brainstorming board, when I get an inspiration from one of our group members, write about this or write about that or, whatever. I can take my brainstorming board and write down some ideas, but then once I start writing, it seems to go in another direction. So I think that's sort of what I mean by letting the pen lead. It's the best laid plan is not always what comes out. So.
Well, and you're one of my favorite poets, so it must be working, at least for me. I love your word choice and I know you do things that I don't know the name of, but how you'll have, like, I think it's, I don't know, is it, I forget, but the same vowel sounds, same sounds, and oh my goodness, there's some beautiful.
Internal rhyme. I do like internal rhyme. I like, one of the things I loved the most about teaching American literature was the poetry that we encountered in that course. And, when you, when I would spend time with students looking at analyzing poems and who did what and who was a master of this or a master of that, all of those things that we look at as we analyze poetry can become a source of inspiration for us to try some of those things that the masters were so good at. And, whether we do it or not, whether we're successful at it or not, we can still attempt. And of course, one of my, my favorite poets is Mary Oliver. She's an amazing poet. I take so much from her in terms of place. Her book Devotions is one that I wouldn't want to live a day without, because she's just, if I could go back and have lunch with someone in history, I think I would pull Mary Oliver up and say, hey, let's go grab a sandwich and have a cup of coffee or something, because she's just, a lot of what I see in her poetry is that's sort of like the poet I want to be when I grow up, is Mary Oliver. And Shakespeare was great. I do still love Shakespeare and his beauty of language and, the rhyme and the way that he wrote. But I love just the normal. There's a sense of, when you read a Mary Oliver poem, you just feel like you're in that moment with her, and you're outside looking at the sky, and you're asking questions, and you're not alone. She's with you in those moments. So I think that those are things to think about when we write. Is who do we want to strive to emulate, and who inspires us, and what literary devices did they use that we can take a stab at. But thank you for that compliment.
I'm always looking forward to our open rights, and I think we have to wait just one more week now.
Yes, I count the days too. I do. She sent out the email or the Facebook reminder yesterday. I just always count those days because they are just treasures.
So I think you have another lovely poem to share with us. It's evening here, so I think it will be a nice way for us to finish it.
So my daytime is your dusk right now, on this side of the world. We are at about, almost 11:26. So we're about a half an hour from lunch, and I think you guys are about maybe 7:30, something like that.
6:30.
6:30. So this one is called Barnyard Concert at Dusk. And this was written on July the 6th. And this was just one that I just wrote. We weren't having an open write that time. But this one is Barnyard Concert. It starts out, stadium of tiered strains, crickets getting on key, off-key bleating goats, sound-boosting roosters straining in, heckling cackles from the hens, melodic symphony of songbirds, grunty strumming backbeat pig, head-banging drumming woodpecker, string section grasshoppers lilting cadence, high-trilling tree frogs, wind chimes ring, porch swing chain keeping tempo as we sway to this cacophonous, harmonious sunset serenade. And so that's probably the way we sort of are in this time of COVID, where we're sort of off key, but we're trying to get some harmony and trying to sit back and find some relaxation in the process of all the chaos.
Wow, beautiful.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's amazing that on the farmyard, it is a symphony. It is harmonious. And it is, but when you describe each of the sounds that are happening, it is cacophonous also. So I think that's a beautiful metaphor for this time we're in.
I think so. It's been the metaphor for where I am, for sure. So it's even in the types of goats, they all have different bleats. So it's definitely true to form.
Good. So what else do we want to say before we sign off?
You froze up just a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anything else we want to say before we sign off?
Are you there? Can you hear me?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm here. Are you hearing me?
I am now. It froze up several times, but it's okay. I mean, it's just as likely that it's here as well as there. So
I wonder if the recording is, yeah. So I'm in Manama, you're in Georgia, and the recording is in Oklahoma. No, I guess it's in the clouds somewhere. Hopefully we have a good recording. But is there anything else you want to say before I sign off?
I'm just hearing you again.
Wow.
It froze up again. Could you hear me?
My goodness. I feel like I'm hearing everything you're saying.
Yeah, I think we're freezing up now.
Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. I think what's happening is now everybody's starting to get on the internet here.
Okay. Well, it's good we're just wrapping it up then, isn't it?
Yes. Perfect timing.
Thank you so much, Kim. It's been a delight getting to know you more and to hear your poems and your insights about education.
Thank you for a great interview. I think it was awesome, and I can't wait to see all of the interviews as they, get posted and whatnot, because I think it's just going to be fun to watch and see where we all were during this time.
Right.
So
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.